In the mid-1970s, in a quiet suburban garage in Los Altos, California, a young man named Steve Jobs, together with his friend Steve Wozniak, began a journey that would change the world. Along with a lesser-known third partner, Ronald Wayne, they created a company called Apple. At the time, personal computers were a niche idea, bulky, expensive, and only accessible to hobbyists or businesses. But Jobs had a vision: computers that were simple, beautiful, and accessible to ordinary people. Wozniak, the technical mind behind the duo, built the Apple I, a modest single-board computer that came with just the essentials: a motherboard and processor. Jobs sold his VW van to fund the project, while Wozniak sold his HP calculator. Together, they convinced a local computer store, the Byte Shop, to buy 50 units. Apple Computer, Inc. was born on April 1, 1976. The Apple. I was primitive by today's standards, but it marked the beginning. Jobs and Wozniak followed it up with the Apple C2 in 1977, a machine that truly brought computing into the mainstream. With a plastic case, color graphics, and expansion slots, it was far more user-friendly than anything else on the market. It was also one of the first successful mass-produced microcomputers. Apple's success with the Apple II was enormous. By the early 1980s, Apple was a rising star in Silicon Valley. They went public in 1980, making millionaires out of many of their early employees. Jobs was only 25 at the time. With money flowing in and the brand growing, Apple began investing heavily in the future of personal computing. But Jobs wasn't content with just improving what existed. He was obsessed with innovation, especially the graphical user interface he had seen during a visit to Xerox PARC. At Xerox's research lab, computers used icons, windows, and a mouse, things unheard of in most computers of the time. Jobs saw the future and immediately wanted Apple to lead it. This led to the development of the Lisa, Apple's first GUI-based computer, which launched in 1983. Unfortunately, Lisa was too expensive and suffered from software issues, but it paved the way for something far more impactful. In 1984, Apple released the Macintosh. It was launched with a dramatic television ad during the Super Bowl, inspired by George Orwell's novel 1984. Directed by Ridley Scott, the commercial showed Apple as a revolutionary force against a dystopian world dominated by conformity, a clear shot at IBM. The Mac was the first widely available computer with a graphical user interface and a mouse. It changed the way people interacted with machines, making computing more visual and intuitive. Despite the excitement, trouble was brewing inside Apple. Jobs' management style was intense, confrontational, and difficult for many employees. His ambitious ideas clashed with the company's more conservative leadership, particularly with John Sculley, the former PepsiCo executive Jobs had recruited to be CEO. By 1985, tensions between Jobs and Sculley escalated. The board sided with Sculley, and Jobs was effectively pushed out of the company he co-founded. At just 30 years old, Jobs was out of Apple. After leaving, Jobs started a new company called Next, aimed at building high-end computers for education and business. He also bought a small animation studio from George Lucas called Pixar. While Next's computers never achieved commercial success, its software and design would play a crucial role later in Apple's story. Pixar, on the other hand, would go on to revolutionize animation with films like Toy Story, becoming a billion-dollar studio and eventually merging with Disney. Back at Apple, the company tried to move forward without Jobs. The late 80s and early 90s were a period of mixed success. While the Mac line continued to sell reasonably well, Apple lost its innovative edge. The company became bloated with too many product lines, including a failed PDA called the Newton and a string of underwhelming Macs. Meanwhile, Microsoft was rising fast with Windows, which offered a GUI similar to the Mac, but with cheaper hardware and broader compatibility. Apple's market share shrank. Profits dipped. Leadership changed multiple times, and by the mid-1990s, many analysts predicted the company's collapse. Apple was seen as a failing brand with no clear future. In 1997, as Apple faced serious financial trouble, it turned back to the person it once pushed away: Steve Jobs. That year, Apple bought Next for around $400 million, bringing Jobs back into the fold. At first, he was just an advisor. But soon, he took over as interim CEO and began reshaping the company with a singular vision. Jobs streamlined Apple's product line, cutting unnecessary projects and focusing on just a few key areas. One of his first major decisions was the introduction of the iMac in 1998. Designed by Jony Ive, the iMac was colorful, fun, and unlike any other PC on the market. It had a built-in modem, USB ports, and a translucent plastic case. The iMac was a hit and marked the beginning of Apple's resurgence. But Jobs wasn't stopping there. He wanted to transform Apple from a computer company into something broader, a lifestyle and digital ecosystem company. In 2001, Apple released iTunes and, shortly after, the iPod. The tagline was simple: 1,000 songs in your pocket. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player, but it was the most elegant, easiest to use, and tightly integrated with iTunes. People loved it. The white earbuds became a cultural symbol. Also, in 2001, Apple opened its first retail store in Virginia. Critics thought it was a mistake, but the Apple Store became a major success. By controlling the retail experience, Apple could show off its products the way it wanted. Over the years, it would become one of the highest-grossing retail chains in the world. By the mid-2000s, Apple was fully reborn. It transitioned its Mac computers to Intel processors, boosting performance and software compatibility. Meanwhile, the iPod continued to evolve, with smaller models and video playback. But Jobs had something even bigger in mind. In 2007, he took the stage and announced a product that combined an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. The crowd went wild as he introduced the iPhone. The iPhone was more than a phone. It was a computer in your pocket with a multi-touch screen, mobile browser, music, and apps. While the first iPhone had limitations, it marked a turning point in mobile technology. In 2008, Apple launched the App Store, allowing developers to create third-party applications for the iPhone. This exploded into a global app economy and transformed how we use our devices. Soon after came the iPhone 3G, 3GS, 4, and more, each more powerful and refined. In 2010, Apple launched the iPad. While tablets had existed before, the iPad was the first to offer a seamless, enjoyable experience for media consumption, browsing, and light productivity. Critics again doubted its value until it sold millions. Apple had created a new category once more. In the background, Steve Jobs' health had been declining. He battled pancreatic cancer for several years and took multiple medical leaves. In 2011, he stepped down as CEO and passed the baton to Tim Cook. Later that year, Jobs passed away. He was 56. His death was mourned worldwide, not just by Apple fans but by millions who saw him as a visionary who helped shape the modern digital age. Under Tim Cook, Apple shifted focus while maintaining its core identity. The company became more operationally efficient, global, and financially dominant. Products like the Apple Watch and AirPods extended Apple's ecosystem. The company also expanded into services: Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, iCloud, Apple Pay, and Fitness Plus. These services began generating recurring revenue beyond hardware sales. Apple emphasized user privacy, green energy, and accessibility, presenting itself as a responsible global tech leader. In 2020, Apple announced a major shift. It would begin making its own chips for Mac, starting with the M1 processor. The move allowed Apple to optimize performance, battery life, and software integration in a way Intel couldn't. The M1 Macs were widely praised and ushered in a new era of powerful, efficient computers. Apple followed with M2 and M3 chips, extending its silicon strategy across devices. In 2023, Apple entered the augmented reality space with the announcement of the Apple Vision Pro, a mixed reality headset promising a new way to interact with digital content. Though still early in its development, it hinted at Apple's long-term ambitions in spatial computing. Today, Apple is one of the most valuable companies in the world, with a market cap surpassing $3 trillion. It operates across continents, employs hundreds of thousands of people, and influences how billions live, work, and communicate. From a garage in California to global dominance, Apple's story is not just one of business success. It's a story of vision, reinvention, and the power of bold ideas to change the world.